You're listening to Politics and Issues with Larry Marino.
Coming up, we're going to talk about this week's massive Democrat spending bill, which is being described by my guest as a giant giveaway to their primary donors, the labor unions. Mark Mix is president of the National Right to Work Committee. Mark, thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Larry, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this important issue and talk about trillions of dollars. I don't get a chance to talk about trillions very often, but that's where we are.
And a giveaway? What? To a supporter, to donors, to labor unions? Explain what's in this that we probably, as Nancy Pelosi used to say, we have to pass to find out what's in it. What's in this bill?
Yeah, exactly, Larry. And well, first, let's just start with the first one. The so-called infrastructure bill is a $1.2 trillion bill that's roughly 2,700 pages long. And you're right. There are very few people who have read it. Those that have read it have basically determined that a very small portion of that 1.2 trillion, some people say less than 25%, some people say 25% to 30% of the folks say that it has anything to do with infrastructure as you and I would identify it, roads and bridges and ports and railroads, those types of things. What is in there, what we found on page 2038, was there a $43 billion giveaway to basically communication worker unions. And they want to build out the broadband, which I guess you could classify as infrastructure. But unless you have a unionized company and you have unionized employees, you probably won't be able to participate in that particular build-out because the language says that you must be, quote, acting in good faith and under the labor laws of the country. And we know that Joe Biden says the labor laws in these countries basically say if you're not a union contractor, you're not going to participate. So that's part of it. The other part of that $1.2 trillion bill has so-called prevailing wage laws attached to it. And these are laws that were passed in the 1930s basically to discriminate against black construction workers. And it said, you have to pay union wages when you do any construction that involves government money. And that's written into all of the infrastructure bill. So we estimate, and basically after evidence from other projects, that this could add up to 30% of the cost of construction by not allowing 85% of construction workers in America to participate because they don't have a union card.
Of course. There's a plan by that to give back to their big donors. One of the bills I was reading, somebody pointed out, because there's a couple out there, has a break for journalists. Did you see that one, that there's some sort of tax break for local journalists to receive? What's this?
Yeah, Larry, I haven't seen that part. I kind of focus on the part that that deals with organized labor and their compulsion and their forced power. But boy, oh boy, if you're going to give money away and you're going to make people enjoy it, you better give it to everybody. So, I'm a big fan of journalists. I love journalists. I think they do great work. So, maybe they ought to get a piece of the action too. But I suspect that's in the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. I haven't seen that in the infrastructure bill.
All right. So when they were talking about infrastructure, there were people saying, well, infrastructure is daycare for families. Infrastructure is a lot of things. No, it's not. Right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if it's truly about, building out the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the things that support commerce and help the economy grow, then I think people are willing to understand that, bridges should be safe and roads need to be expanded and potholes need to be filled. But, sometimes we have to wonder just how big the federal government gets when it comes to stuff like this. And Larry, you won't be surprised. Well, I know you're not surprised, but, the federal government has decided, like a drug dealer, they give this money to the states become dependent upon it, and then the states have to have it in order to continue their rapid growth. And so what we see with this infrastructure bill is really a federal government control over, basically the states and expanding that control over the states, and they do it by giving away money. And it's really unfortunate they do that, too, because, I think you pay here in California. I'm a Virginian, and I know we pay a pretty good chunk of our gas tax. A gallon of gas goes to, allegedly, roads, the road fund, but it never gets spent that way.
Well, people look at California as kind of one of the examples of what not to do, but Democrats want to use it as the example of what to do, and it's lagging in a lot of ways, except its gas prices are not lagging. If you were recently in California, you saw that it's not unusual to be paying $5 a gallon for gas now. So things are going up. I was going to ask you, though, what about this inflation going on and all this money being pushed in at a time when wages are higher because of inflation and not enough workers? aren't they just stoking that even more by pushing more money down the tube like this?
Yeah, absolutely, Larry, and that's a good definition of inflation. I mean, the more money they print, the more money that's out there, the greater the demand for goods, which increases the price of goods. So, inflation is kind of a misunderstood principle of an economic system, but it really is a result of government action. And if you continue to push the money into the system, you devalue the money you have. When you devalue the money you have, people need more of it to basically stay even, if you will, or keep their heads above water. And that's what's happening in the inflation situation. That's something that union officials have used very effectively. For example, as I mentioned in the infrastructure bill, the Davis-Bacon wages. They artificially inflate wages, which artificially inflates the cost of building a government project, a government building or a road or a bridge. And then the taxpayers have to pay more, and they lose more of their money, so they've got to have more money. And it's a vicious spiral, and it's really, albeit it was transitory, I think, a couple months ago, but I don't think inflation's transitory anymore. I think it's here to stay for a while.
It's here to stay, and of course, anyone who's worked hard and put money away for a rainy day, and not been wasteful, and have taken the responsible path, their dollars are worth less. They're not having the same buying power. By 5 to 8% of their wealth has been eroded, and they're just sitting there in Washington ready to pump more money down the tube, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us to the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, which basically is the kitchen sink. Larry, they're trying to find a way to pass an agenda that can't get passed because they know it's not popular. They're trying to find a way to pass it with a 50-vote margin, with the 50-50 split, with Kamala Harris breaking the tie, because they know that many of the provisions in the reconciliation bill that they're trying to shoehorn into that bill just don't fly with, for example, Joe Manchin in West Virginia. I mean, if the energy policy that they're trying to push into the infrastructure bill gets in there, I mean, his constituents in West Virginia are basically out of business. And so those are the things they're trying to do. And there's a lot of labor policy that they're trying to shoehorn into the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill as well. And boy, oh boy, it'll be interesting to see when we actually see the legislation, what's in it. Because you pointed out already, I like to use that line that Nancy Pelosi said when we came to Obamacare. You gotta pass it to know what's in it, and that's really what's happening with this reconciliation bill.
Yeah, well, so much of what we hear is that they're pushing this green energy agenda, and as you know, the first part of that is to wean us off of fossil fuels. So what do is you make it really expensive, and you stop drilling in your country and in your state and processing it here, and then you're subject to paying overseas countries money and they raise the price on it, so it gets very expensive. Then it makes the transition a little more palatable because, some of these other forms aren't as efficient as fuels that come from oil and petroleum products, right?
Yeah, that's right. And one of the side stories in all of that, Larry, and you explained it perfectly, that's what they're trying to do. But think about it as a rank-and-file union member. So 1 week into the Biden administration, this, quote, most pro-union president in American history cancels the Keystone XL Pipeline, which is bringing oil down from fossil fuels down from Canada to our refineries. And that was a project labor agreement, which means that only unionized employees could work on it. So in the first week of his administration, he puts literally thousands of pipe fitters and operating engineers and welders on the unemployment line. I mean, he's pro-big labor. He's not pro-rank and file. And then they put a moratorium on exploration, to your point, Larry, saying that, we're not going to explore anymore on federal lands. Well, frankly, if you're from the West, it's very likely that when you walk more than a mile, you probably end up on some federal land somewhere. And it really is unfortunate for rank-and-file union members when this type of energy policy, pushing us, to your point, pushing us to this so-called Green New Deal, is putting union workers off and on the unemployment line.
Yeah. So that harkens the question, why do union workers or unions continue to take the money they collect from their workers and apply it toward these Democrats who want to take their jobs away?
Yeah, great question, and not sure I have the perfect answer, but here's what I'll say. The disconnect between union officials, the so-called bosses of big labor, and the disconnect between them and the rank-and-file workers who they claim to represent is growing wider and wider and wider all the time. The radical positions of Randy Weingarten at the American Federation of Teachers, which is an AFL-CIO affiliate, and the union boss for the United Teachers of Los Angeles. I mean, in that interview that she did a month ago, I mean, we learned some really interesting things about the power of the union officials, but that's not the teachers in the classroom for the most part, and nor are the bosses in Washington, D.C. sitting in their granite buildings who are making, putting the union's endorsement on these people that put rank-and-file workers out of work. Are they representative of the rank-and-file worker? And in fact, in 2016, Donald Trump wouldn't be president of the United States or been elected if union workers in Wisconsin and Michigan and Indiana hadn't voted for him.
Well, I guess the administration is giving the unions something once they receive that letter that alleged that parents protesting at their schools are terrorists. The Justice Department jumps in and says, yeah, we're going to have to study that. It may be the case. I mean, that has really been a shocking decision.
Absolutely, and we've got a guy running for governor in Virginia in the election coming up in 3 weeks who said that, and I guess he's fully in favor of it because he said that parents shouldn't be involved at all in a child's education.
Yeah, Terry McAuliffe, right?
Yeah,
you're
right,
back
Terry
there. How's that looking? You're back in that area. Is that look like he's going to still win even though he says that, or because it's so Democrat, or is there a good chance that Republicans might get that?
Well, I think the race is basically neck and neck at this point, and I think one of the primary issue is going to be the educational issue. You've seen kind of the leadership of parents out in Loudoun County that have basically been showing up at school board meetings, and that's what got Merrick Garland to say, yeah, the FBI better investigate this, and the National School Board Association asking the FBI to investigate it. But the race is going to be close, and the reason it's going to be close is because Terry McAuliffe is making the moms mad. And Larry, you and I both know that if you make mom mad, things change quickly. They have to.
They do indeed. You do not. Well, you know how they say "happy wife, happy life." The same thing with moms, and to suggest because parents are interested in the curriculum and want to have a say in what's being taught, to equate them with terrorists when there really, haven't been examples of violence, so to speak, that they can cite. It's just shocking. Well, we're out of time. If people want to learn more about the organization you're with, where do they go?
Larry, they can find us on that amazing interweb at www.nrtwc.org, nrtwc.org.
Mark Mix, President of the National Right to Work Committee, thank you. Appreciate you being on.
Larry, my pleasure. Thank you.